Welcome to the Beyond the Mic Show, a show where we interview top coaches, consultants, and experts about topics that will help you run your coaching business more profitably and serve your clients more effectively. I'm your host, Matt Walrath, and today's guest is author Mike Michalowicz. Mike has written some of my favorite business books that make entrepreneurship easier, including Profit First, Pumpkin Plan, and Clockwork. And I'm excited because he has a new book coming out, which is called Fix This Next. Reading Profit First changed my life. Before reading it, I was billing well over 6 figures of coaching and taking home almost none of it because I was reinvesting in the business and it was burning me out. Once I started running my business Profit First, my financial stress levels dropped to 0. That's why I wanted to get Mike on the show, so we could teach you how you can make more money and work less without adding a single new client. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Beyond the Mic Show. I'm here today with Mike Michalowicz. Don't try to spell his last name. Just go to mikemotorbike.com if you want to find him. He's the author of Profit First and a number of amazing books on entrepreneurship. And I'm so excited to have him on the show today to talk to you about some of the concepts that he has taught through his books that have changed my life as a business owner. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Matthew, I'm particularly excited to be here. Let's crush it today.
Awesome. So I would love to start out because I learned about you because of your book, Profit First. One of my friends who ran a gym and was in what you call entrepreneurial poverty, he found your book and it changed his life. And I had gotten to a point where when I was an individual coaching nutrition, I was more profitable as an individual working in my business than when I grew it and had 10 people working for me. So I was making way less money working on my business because I was getting paid last. Read your book, completely changed the way that I thought about business and accounting. And I'd love for you just to give the listeners the overview of what's the difference between running your business profit first and running it the way that most of us tend to run it?
Yeah, great question. And I can totally empathize with what you said of the independent person actually making some money as we grow. And the funny thing is we started at growth because we want to achieve financial freedom. And the exact opposite happens. It becomes a financial burden. Well, I believe this is foundationally not a flaw of entrepreneurs. It's the formula we follow. The traditional formula is that it's sales minus expenses equals profit. It's called GAAP, or Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, and it's perpetuated through all accounting practices. It's in every accounting book. Listen, it's even in our vernacular. We call profit the bottom line or year end. Here's the problem. Logically, it makes sense, and I get it. The problem is it doesn't work with the behavior of entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs, we do what's called bank balance accounting. We log into our bank account, see if we have money. If we have money, we spend it. And if we don't have money, we panic. We got to start selling more. So we become very top line oriented. We need more money, more cash flow. And what Profit First does is it flips the formula. What it is now, it's sales minus profit equals expenses. What I'm saying in practice is every time we have revenue come into our business, a deposit, we take, a predetermined percentage of that money, allocate it toward profit, hide it away from the business, and then we run the business off the remainder. Now, the power of this simple system is you continue to run your business off your bank balance. You can still log into your bank account, see how much money you have, how most business owners operate. But now, because there's less money, because we've taken our profit out first, we work within these constrained parameters. We've basically reverse engineered profit. Because if you want to allocate 5 or 10 or 20%, where the number is to profit and remove it, the remainder is what you have to run off of. So it starts to direct our business on what's available to spend. And if we can't pay our bills out of that remainder, our business telling us we can't afford those bills, cut costs, or more importantly, increase margin, dictate a higher premium for what you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for me, I know some of the audience, they're just getting started out with coaching. So maybe if we could, there's actually a story in the book. I think it was your mom or your grandma always ended up having enough money for travel because she ran a similar system. And I think for people putting it in terms of the personal story, might highlight exactly how this system runs and works. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Share that. So, Profit First is not a new system in regards to this has been around in personal finances for hundreds and hundreds of years, for centuries. I'm just the guy who says this isn't just in personal finance. These systems can be translated to business. Well, in our personal lives, there's this concept called the envelope system. It's been around for a while. My mother actually brought it home to our house. This is where I learned it. So as a child, we grew up this way. And my mom had literally physical envelopes, and they had different words on, like food, travel, mortgage. She worked at a local factory in the front of the factory, and she worked part-time, and she cashed in her check, and she'd divide up that money, my father too, in these different envelopes for its different intended uses. When she went, for example, food shopping, she grabbed the food envelope and she'd go there and shop with what was in there. And she always had enough money. Now, here's the interesting thing. She didn't have the same amount. She had enough. And what I mean is she worked with the money that was in there. She had volatile income. Sometimes she worked overtime and she'd make more money. Other times she was sick and she'd make less money. And so the income in the food envelope would vary, but she'd work with what was in there, rice or beans, or she would, get a nice roast chicken. This is true also for our business. We have volatile income. And what we're doing is we're digitizing this envelope system. We're going to do this at your bank. We set up multiple accounts. So if you're in PT, you may have an account for profit, one to pay your salary. You may have one for taxes, one to pay the ongoing bills. You may need one for equipment, so you can buy and replace equipment. I suggest not starting out with so many accounts. We kind of build toward it. But these are effectively the envelopes. Now when money flows into the business, say $1,000 of deposits come in, you don't have $1,000 to spend. We need to carve it up. Make sure you, the most important employee ever, is the owner. Make sure the owner's being compensated for the work they do. There's money reserved for profit, which is different than owner's pay. Owner's pay is for being an employee within our company. Profit is a reward for being a shareholder, for starting the business in the first place. Tax reserve, operating expenses. And now when it comes to paying bills, you look at your operating expenses and you know exactly what's available to pay your bills. And if you can't pay your bills, you can't afford them. We need to increase margin, cut costs. You need to replace equipment. Look at your equipment account. There's the money in there, and that's what you have to work with. And this way, we assure that the money's carved up to serve the multiple purposes it's intended for.
Yeah. And it's a system that has completely changed the way that I work in terms of innovating with my marketing. Before I was like, oh, I've got this money, I'm just going to throw it at marketing. It'll grow the audience. And therefore, in the future, I'll be able to pay myself, but I'll take a pay cut right now for it. Yeah. And Mark Zuckerberg ends up being the person who makes the most money in my business, which is
it's true. It's very normal and typical of entrepreneurs. I'm wired the same way. There's this behavioral concept called Parkinson's law. It was a theorist from the 1950s. He studied human behavior. He realizes as resources expand, our consumption of that resource expands. And so as more money flows into our business, any money flows into our business, we see that money is available for our most apparent need. We got to run ads. We need more clientele. Oh, I got $1,000 came in. Let me spend $1,000. But with Profit First, $1,000 comes up. The first step is always to allocate. So we carve up that money. And now for the ads account, you may see you have $100 or less. Now it's like, those Facebook ads, we become much more critical of it. I don't know if it's worth $100, and I don't even know if there's going to be a return, if there's a true ROI. Maybe we can do some other kind of marketing. So as we constrain the flow of money, it also invokes more thought, forced frugality, and also innovative thinking. We start breaking the rules in the industry. We say, you know what, maybe I make an alliance with a nutritionist. Maybe there's more clientele I can drive through having an alliance where we're referring opportunities to each other than running Facebook ads. So the constraint of money does not hamper the growth of business. It actually facilitates innovative thinking, which can actually facilitate faster growth of the business.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand because right now I know for me, having a nutrition coaching business, I see the ads that are targeted to me on Facebook, and most of them are like, here's this amazing Facebook ad system or this amazing ad system that's going to get you this huge positive ROI. So I know for some people, there's going to be a bit of that comparison syndrome. And I'm wondering, is there a place for taking a risk or taking a gamble that this amount that you might plow back or reinvest into your business could pay off in the future within the Profit First model?
Yeah, there is. So you can call it the investment, not the investment account, the advertising account, but we do it at a test level and to validate our assumptions. And that's the big step that most entrepreneurs skip on, is determine what their expected outcome is before they roll the die. So they don't say, you know what, if I do this, I expect that for every dollar I spend, it's going to have a return of $3. And that means that if I do $100 of ads, I need to bring on one client or something, and that would justify it. Then we run the minimal cost to prove out our concept. So you run $100 of ads as opposed to $1,000 of ads and say, did it prove it out? If it doesn't prove it out, is our assumptions flawed? And that means we got to make new assumptions and maybe this is risky. Do we not have a big enough data set? Do we not test it long enough? Or do we just rule out our assumption or our belief and we found other conclusive evidence this isn't going to work? It's that testing and proving that many entrepreneurs skip on. Instead, we use a process called the gut. It's like, my gut says we should do this. I've seen it all around. It works for other people. And then we're in the hole, 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 bucks, and our credit cards ranked up. And we're like, oh my God, this didn't work out. Well, that was an expensive lesson. So Profit First forces us to work within constraints, which forces us to bring deliberate pause, much more thoughtful approaches to how we spend our money. And we should experiment. We should test things out, but to experiment on a small level, prove a concept, then build, prove it further, and then roll out fully.
Yeah. And that makes sense to actually run the tests and maybe even have an account that you've set aside some money to play with, to see and validate those ideas. Totally.
Yeah. And the thing too is there's a lot of knowledge to be gleaned from our contemporaries. We should network with people that are in the same space and not direct competitors, but in the same space, serving maybe other communities, other niches, and ask them what's really working for you. And cloning the process of other people that are successful at something usually results in similar success. I own my own organization, and one thing we did is we evaluated these other companies. There's a company called Story Brand. I've become great friends with the owner, Don Miller. And they have a tremendous organization of members that are certified. And we certified members in a whole different community. And I sat down with Don for a day and I said, would you be willing to outline everything? He's like, absolutely. He gave me everything. We just copied it. And sure enough, the results are nearly identical. I mean, verbatim. And that means he did all the ROI and I was able to benefit from it. And I simply asked. And I reciprocate to him too. When he has questions, I'm like, here's what works for us. So I think there is a lot of this research and testing that's been done already by others. And all we have to do is simply ask.
That makes sense. And I think that's so important because one of the things that I tend to do is set aside some money for mentorship. The thing is, through the podcast and actually through my network, I'm able to ask certain questions. I was able to ask you a question before the show, for example. But the thing is, there's other things where I might need to pay someone to be a mentor. And so I set aside some money so that that's an option. But at the same time, I've created these opportunities where I can learn things from other people in the industry. And there's a reciprocation here. It's like you're getting access to my audience and I'm getting access to your knowledge, and so are they.
And people are surprisingly forthcoming. Like you asked a very candid, I think, an important question that could help you. And I shared very explicitly what we're doing. And I hope it will drive benefit for you. The nice thing is you can ask that same question of multiple people, and then you start seeking a common thread. I think there's power in common threads. So I do the same thing. I ask questions regularly, and I register in my head. And when I start hearing, oh my gosh, the last 6 people or whatever number of people have said something that's so similar, and I can deploy that, that's a valid opportunity. I think one thing that I'm careful of is if I hear one idea from one person, maybe it's working for them, it may not be valid or applicable to me. So I definitely repeat the same questions over and over, looking for these threads.
Yeah, I asked the same question of other businesses that have a similar model to Profit First. I actually asked the Story Brand people because I saw that they have Story Brand certified guides. And then there was like some bot maker academy that did some similar model with education and the people that they've certified. So I'm starting to see the threads. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've talked about some things here that might be applicable to people who've already started or are more advanced in their business, where they're already established and feeling that entrepreneurial poverty. But I'm curious for the people who are just starting out. I know I have some people who just got their nutrition or PT certifications and they're just starting out in business. They might have 3 clients that are their friends and family that they're working with for a very nominal rate. So for them, how does Profit First work? How can they start this out and still feel like they can grow their business?
If you're a brand new business, I would argue Profit First is your biggest ally because you don't know better. And I'm air quoting around that. It's interesting. So we've rolled out Profit First now to an estimated 300,000 companies, maybe even over that point now. And what we found is the businesses that are most successful started earlier on in their business lifespan and started off more slowly and built the system out. So what I suggest for brand new businesses is implement the system and start maybe with a low threshold. Like maybe you set your profit setting to 5% or 6%. And then every quarter, every 90 days or so, ramp it up. The power is because you have a brand new business, this just becomes a standard of how you operate. You don't know better and you don't have to unwind bad fiscal habits. So you start putting the good habits in place. It's like raising a kid to eat vegetables. Like, the day you're born, you start eating vegetables, you eat vegetables. Chances are, as you enter your adulthood, you're going to eat vegetables. If you're born and I say, you know what, you're going to have sour worms instead of vegetables for the rest of your life, it's going to be much more difficult, I presume, to convert you over to vegetables later on in your life. So we want to establish these good habits early. So a brand new startup business, implement Profit First as soon as you can. Do it on a small percentage basis. And I outline this all in the book, exactly how to do it. But your fiscal habits will be the right habits from the get-go. And as you grow your business, you'll be wildly profitable. Interestingly, it's the businesses that are more established. They can successfully do this. It just takes a little more dedication because we have these established processes we're doing that may not be serving us. We may be hand to mouth. You may have 10 employees, not able to pay yourself as much as when you're independent. To unwind that and keep 10 employees and start making it profitable, we have to roll out Profit First very deliberately and carefully. It's as easy to revert back to those bad habits. So it's the established companies that often take us even a little bit longer to roll it out and to be a little more cautious than the small businesses. Startup.
I love that. And I love the example you used with starting people on gummy worms and trying to transition them to vegetables. Yeah.
He's 12 years old and all his teeth are rotted out.
It's perfectly relevant to the audience. Yeah, that wouldn't go over too well. And it's interesting too, because hearing you talk about what it would take when you're starting up and also with innovating in terms of how to actually generate business or find clients. There's a concept I've heard you talk about called, I think it's the, the queen bee rule for the business. Yeah. Could you tell people a little bit about what that is and how to figure out what their queen bee role is in their own business?
I'd love to. So I wrote about this in my book, Clockwork, and I was conducting research specifically on what drives business efficiency. And it's interesting, as I write my books, I often find that solutions to problems are answered by nature itself. Nature has spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of years, figuring out solutions, and we can clone or biomimic what nature's done and implement it in our business. It's called biomimicry. And what I found is beehives are extremely efficient in scalability. They can, you see a bee flying around the next day, there's this like massive hive. How do they organize such quick growth? Well, what they do is they pinpoint the most critical element for the survivability and thrivability of the beehive, which in this case is the production of eggs. So bees actually die pretty quickly. There's a lot of turnover, if you will. And and so every bee is programmed to know that if we are not producing eggs as a colony, the colony is in jeopardy. Therefore, always make sure eggs are being produced. Now, it happens that the queen bee lays eggs, so that's the queen bee, but the queen bee role, the QBR, is the egg production. I'm not suggesting, by the way, the queen bee is the most important bee. She's expendable. They can remove her, spawn new queen bees. Every bee knows we got to be making new eggs. And sometimes the hives get too cold in the winters. They'll actually rub their wings together to bring heat to the hive to protect the eggs. In the summers, it gets too hot. They actually flap their wings to cause a vortex of wind, air conditioning effectively to cool the hive to protect the eggs. So every bee knows that. It's only when the eggs are properly cared for and being produced can the bees go on and then do their other primary job function, collecting nectar and pollen, defending the hive, and so forth. Well, in our businesses, there's a single role that is driving the survivability and thrivability of our business. It's the most important role. There's many things we do, but there's only one thing that can ever be the most important. Sadly, most businesses have never pinpointed this. I call it the QBR. And in every business, there is a QBR. We need to pinpoint it. The shortcut to finding is this. Ask yourself, and hopefully you've defined this, and if you haven't, define it now. What's the core promise you make to your customer base? Like, what's your biggest commitment? I promise that you'll be have more energy than ever before. I promise that you'll be, your blood will be healthy, cleaner than ever before. I commit to driving you to the proper weight so you'll lose weight or gain weight accordingly, whatever it is. But I know you may be serving all those things. What is the primary? And there can only ever be one primary. What's the primary promise? As an author, just as a comparison, I promise to simplify entrepreneurship. That's my biggest promise. Hopefully entertain and engage and blah, blah, blah. But my biggest promise is I simplify entrepreneurship. Once you know your promise, then we rewind one step and say, what's the activity, the singular activity that most drives the promise? That activity is the QBR. So if you promise, to have someone be confident in their own body, maybe the activity that supports it, the exercise and so forth, but it's actually the customer seeing the progress. So it's the documentation of their history while working with you that actually drives the most confidence. Well, then that activity must always be delivered. It must always be improved on, and it must be protected, even above everything else. FedEx promises to deliver packages on time. That's a promise. The QBR is the logistics of packages. FedEx could say, tomorrow we're gonna really amplify our customer service and screw package logistics. Who cares about the packages? They'll go out of business overnight. They may be super friendly, but they don't know where the freaking package is. Now, the reverse, if FedEx says, you know what, we're going to ensure every package gets delivered on time, every single time, but screw customer service. We're not going to answer the phones anymore. That will compromise them. There'll be talk like, FedEx can't get hold of them, but your package got delivered. It will compromise them, but it won't put them out of business. The QBR is what keeps the business afloat and moving along. But if they stop doing it, they're done. Because most small businesses don't know what their QBR is, they do a little of this, they do a little bit of that, a little of this, and they wonder why the business takes 2 steps forwards and 3 steps back. The reason is they don't know their QBR. And now you have the shortcut. Know your promise or define it if you haven't, and then figure out what's the singular activity driving that promise forward. That's your QBR. Always keep that humming along.
That's a really important exercise to go through. And thanks so much for sharing that, because
You're welcome.
I think about for my businesses, because I have a nutrition coaching business and I have a business that certifies nutrition coaches. And the thing is, for me, the QBR is always making sure that the coaching clients are having a VIP experience and they are having the best coaching experience possible. And for the certified coaches, it's the same. I need to make sure that they are seeing a return on investment in the education that they've invested in by me providing them with that VIP experience. And now the thing wrapped up in there is that requires me as a person who's delivering a service to deliver upon that service. Now, how do I, as a service-based business person, start to create a little bit more clockwork within my business?
Yeah, right. The goal, I believe, of a business owner, if you so desire, is to extract yourself from the business in its entirety so the business can operate alone from you. In many small businesses, the business owner is the one serving the QBR because they're often their zone of genius. They can deliver on this stuff. So we have to start kind of breaking ourselves out in pieces and slowly replacing us with other people, other systems, technology, and so forth, until we can be extracted. And I believe the ultimate test is a 4-week vacation. Most businesses experience all elements during a monthly cycle, new customers, collecting, delivering services, and so forth. So in theory, if the business owner can be extracted for a full month with no active input, no connection, and the business continues to grow in their absence, it likely can continue on into perpetuity. So the first thing, it's kind of reverse engineer, is you set a 4-week vacation. And I'm not saying tomorrow, but I'm saying like a year and a half from now, book a 4-week vacation, total disconnect. You'll likely have the oh shit moment and say, oh my God, what am I going to do now? That's good, because that means your mindset has shifted from doing work and how am I going to deliver to how am I going to automate? And that's the key. Then we start extracting ourselves out. And listen, as I write books, I do it to serve other people, but I also do it because I know this is what I need for myself. So I've implemented the clockwork system in my own business. I have 14 employees. We're a tiny little business here. But I realized the QBR as an author for me is, my promise is to make entrepreneurship simple, as I shared. My QBR, the activity that drives that, is writing books. So I do interviews like we're doing now. I do speaking and so forth. And these are significant, but the most important thing is writing books. Like if I never did an interview again, I never did a speech again, but I wrote really, really, really powerful books, my business will continue to sustain, if not grow. If I do wonderful interviews, but I start writing crappy books, I'm in trouble. So the QBR is my books. But I realized, oh my gosh, I've painted myself in the corner because I'm the only guy who can write the books. That's when I said, well, hold on, how do I extract myself? So I could hire a ghostwriter. That's one option. That's not congruent and integral with what I want, so I won't do that. But I also then realized, well, there's this For Dummies series out there. Why not write the For Entrepreneur series? So that's exactly what I started to do. I wrote a book called, we're talking about Profit First, but now I have all these derivative books, not written by me, but other authors. So there's Profit First for micro gyms. That's a new book coming out by John Briggs. Profit First for e-commerce providers. There's Profit First for contractors. There's one coming out in Australia, Profit First for tradies, which are contractors in Australia.
Yeah.
So there's all these derivative books coming out. The Profit First brand's elevating. It drives revenue toward my organization, yet I don't have to do anything actively to support that. So even if you do something as artisanal as an author or a painter, for example, there are ways to even extract yourself out of that and have the business run on automatic.
That's so cool to hear that. For you being an author, you found the way to actually extract yourself. How long did it take you to actually come to that?
Well, it took me about 11 years, right? So I've been an author for 11 years. So maybe it took me about 7 years. It was about 4 or 5 years ago as I started working on Clockwork. It takes me about 5 years to write a book. There's a thesis, testing, concepts, beta testing, and then I actually start writing the book. And it's the last 2 years I write the book. And I'm also using myself as a guinea pig. So about 2-3 years ago is when I really started guinea pigging on myself. And that's when I booked my own first 4-week vacation. And I had the oh shit moment. I was like, I'm an author. I can't do this. Like, I got to keep writing books. I'm saying I got to go on cold turkey here and I got deadlines. What am I going to do? And the interesting thing is, as you go toward this 4-week vacation, is you take small incremental tests. Like, can you remove yourself from the business for a week? Kind of get out of that workaholic syndrome. Can you do it for 2 weeks? My 2-week test, I went down to Australia to really disconnect myself. And I found a big problem. I left and like 3 days later, there wasn't a single email from my team. There was nothing. I started emailing, what's going on? I started to reinsert myself in my business. My own ego kicked in. And when I came back, I asked my team, I said, on a 1 to 10, 10, you need me back, or I'm sorry, 10, you never need me again. The business is fine. A 1, get back to work immediately. We're desperate. Where do I stand? They said, it's about a 9.5. We don't need you. I said, well, what happened with the 0.5? They said, Mike, you interfered. You reinsert yourself and we felt empowered. We had this going. So I realized my own ego became this impediment. So it was that process where I started realizing the last thing kind of that keeps me clinging on to the business is my own ego. If I can remove the ego and release this kind of the copy and the ability for other people to write my books under this domain, I'll be free from the business being dependent on me. And that was the trigger for starting these derivative or supplemental series of books. And I think Clockwork may start a supplemental series. I may do it with my new book. It's called Fix This Next. It doesn't come out until 2020, but I may start writing that for other industries too, through these derivative authors.
That's so cool to hear. And it's really interesting to me to hear that it was that ego that was latching on to you being in the business that kept you from having a business that ran itself. Because I experienced that when I first started out hiring other nutrition coaches to coach my clients. I had this thing like, it was a bit of a fear. It was like my ego was like, well, if other people can do it, you're not special anymore. What if they steal your clients, this and that? And so for me, I really inserted myself into the business. And when I hit that peak, or I guess the biggest valley where I wasn't making very much money in the business, I wasn't the one extracting it. It was my employees. And I was doing the most work because I'd inserted myself so much into the business. That's where I finally found Profit First and actually started to remove myself and untangle myself. And it took a lot of inner work for me, to be honest. It was dealing with that ego and those fears.
You know what's thanks for sharing that. You know what's so funny is ego is an ally and an enemy at the same time. Like, you got to have this confidence to go into business in the first place. You got to exude it. And that's where it's our ally, because if we didn't have that trust in ourselves effectively, we'd be in trouble. But then it can come unwieldy where we think the business is dependent upon us, that we are this superhero for the business. I call it the superhero syndrome in the book, that we swoop in, save the business yet again, and then swoop out. And that's where this business has this almost, I don't know, this is ineffective, harmful relationship with us because of our ego. And so we need to channel the ego in the beginning to drive us forward, but then remove us. And ultimately, I found the best way for myself was actually just redirecting my ego. I used to call myself the superhero. I now call myself the super visionary, which even feeds my ego more. But what that means is I have clarity on where I think our organization can change our world. But I'm empowering my team members to be the ones who lead the charge. That's how I redirected that label for me. So my big fat ego is still served, but also the business is not being impeded by me.
That's really funny because there's this book called Wild Mind, and it's a field guide to the psyche. And he pretty much uses a directions-based field guide. So your north direction is your nurturing parent if it's healthy. But then it can be this like wounded soldier if it's this sub-archetype. So if it's this like underdeveloped version of that archetype. And they talk about how Japanese soldiers who were stranded on islands during World War II and thought the war was still going on, in order to reintegrate them into society, they had to take them from this, we're like still fighting the war, and they had to take that, what they were doing, it's like the ego, and be like, hey, you can fight that war, but in this other domain within the new society that we've created.
Yeah.
And you almost have to do the same thing with your ego. It's like you have to take this soldier that thinks this war's still going on and be like, hey, the war's over, but I know that that's what you want to do. So here's a better place for you to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Mastery of our mind is the biggest determinant of our success. It really is. And I think we all know that. I'm now much more deliberate in the process for myself.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And it looks like we're coming up on, you've got an appointment. So
yeah,
Oh
no, that's why I was checking my phone.
Yeah. I was like, I feel like we're starting to get there. So Mike, where can people find more about you and your books and everything that we've talked about today?
Thank you for letting me share. The website is MikeMichalowicz.com. To your earlier point, no one can spell that. So it's Mike Motorbike. That was my nickname in high school. And so if you go to MikeMotorbike.com, it's very clear. There's a button that say get the tools. That will give you my books, free chapters. And it's not like fluff chapters. It's the actual core concepts. So you can drive the systems in your business immediately. Plus, I used to write for the Wall Street Journal. Those articles are there. I'm a podcaster and blogger. All that content comes with one click in one email. It's all listed out for you.
Yeah. And I definitely recommend for everybody watching and listening, go check it out, because Mike's books really do take you from being a brand new entrepreneur all the way through all of the things that you're going to face, all the challenges that you're going to face as an established entrepreneur. And his books, each one of them, if you're on his website, it's like, oh, all right, Profit First is to overcome entrepreneurial poverty. It's like Clockwork is to remove me from my business. It's these short, punchy taglines. You know exactly what you're going to get. And Profit First is actually required reading for anybody going through our certification programs or business mentorships. Yeah, and the great thing is that, like you said, it's not fluff chapters or fluff that you give away. Like on your website, you've got all the PDFs from the book that actually help you run this system. So for me, reading the books gave me so much context for the system and allowed me to stay true to, okay, I'm running my business this way. I'm running the accounting this way. But then everything I needed is right there on your website.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mike. Well, thanks so much again for coming on the show, and feel like I could talk to you about every single one of your books. So maybe we'll have to do this again sometime.
More time, or maybe next go around.
Awesome.
Talk soon, Mike. Take care, brother.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Mike Michalowicz. In the comments below, tell me, have you been wondering where all your coaching revenue disappears to? While you're down in the comments, please make sure to like the show and subscribe to the channel to get notified when we release new shows to help you run your coaching business more profitably and serve your clients more effectively. Much love, Beyond Macros heroes. I'll see you next time.